Hello Resithrivers, welcome back to the channel. In this video I want to talk about debt in the UK and how it controls you. Now I'm not going to go all technical, giving you stats and all that. I'm not going to do that in this video. I am the statistics because this is a reflection video. I'm coming from experience. Now when I came to the UK, the moment I got into the system, meaning that I started working, I started paying my rent, bills started coming in and all that. The moment that happened, I started getting phone calls. I started receiving letters through my inbox telling me, oh, you've got this pre-approved credit card. We can give you this loan. You don't have to pay anything for so many months. And I mean, I was getting all kinds of letters. And as I was reading these letters, I was like, wow, this is really exciting. There's this credit card that they're willing to just pre-approve. Pre-approve means it's already been approved before you go through the checks. Because when you apply for a credit card or a loan, they have to do a credit search on you and determine if you're eligible, if your credit score is good. Because mind you, I didn't have any credit cards because I was just coming from Zimbabwe. I was operating on a clean slate. So I wasn't aware of the credit card system in the UK. I mean, that didn't enter my mind. All I knew were these letters that I was reading, that I could get a credit card. It was already approved. All I needed to do was fill in a form and the credit card would be sent to me. So yeah, I found that really exciting. The same goes for loans because at the time, there were a lot of things that I needed because mind you, I was starting over. I needed new clothes because when I relocated from Zimbabwe, I had flimsy clothes, like clothes that were not suitable for this environment, for this weather. So I needed a new wardrobe. I needed to keep up with my rent. Also at the time, because of college, I was going to college and having to connect from college to my shift. I found that a bit stressful. So it came to a point where I knew I needed a car. I definitely needed a car and I needed furniture as well because when I relocated, I started living in this tiny bed seat. I mean, it had furniture, but the furniture, wasn't really up to standards, to be honest with you. So knowing that I needed all these things to start my new life here in the UK and seeing these letters that were flying through my letterbox, it got me excited. The temptation was too high. At first, I resisted the letters. I just ignored them. And I'll tell you how I got myself into debt in a minute. So what I just described to you is one reason why people get into debt. Is the cost of starting over. So as I said, at first I resisted, and then as time went on, I got really tempted. One of the reasons I got really tempted was I had left my child back home. If you're a mom, then you know what I'm talking about. If you can't see your kids, like physically see them, you always be worrying about them, even though the child is being taken care of, very well taken care of. So I knew I needed to go and see her for my own peace of mind. And because I was working only 20 hours a week, the money I was getting was not enough for me to afford that airfare. So it got to a point where I knew I needed to get the money from somewhere. Otherwise, I was going to go crazy, not seeing my daughter. So at the time, I had learned that in the UK, you can get credit, you can get a loan for your own personal use. It's called a personal loan. You don't have to explain it as such. Of course, they will ask you why you need that loan. You just have to tick the box to say it's a personal loan for my personal expenses. So that's how I got my personal loan. I got about £2,000. I knew it was enough to pay for my airfare and to buy my little girl some clothes to take home, food, and so on. So as a parent, I had other financial obligations back home. I mean, no one was pestering me to say, oh, send money, we need money for this and that to give your child. No, it wasn't like that. But as a parent, you have those financial obligations. You don't need people to ask you to send anything. So this was my responsibility. And also one thing I didn't realize when I was taking that loan, when I took a credit card, I didn't realize the interest rates. I didn't know about interest rates and I didn't know how to use credit cards correctly, because when used correctly in the UK, credit cards can actually work in your favor. They boost your credit rating. But at the time, I was completely ignorant. I didn't take the time to read the fine print. I mean, how many of us actually take the time to read the fine print? I mean, let's go a thing. But guess what? These days, I sit down and read everything. It is fine for a reason. That print is small for a reason. This is what I've realized. So yeah, take the time to read that small print, because that is where people get caught out. So this will be my second reason why we find ourselves in debt in the UK. It is because of financial obligations back home. This is where we talk about black tax obligations as well, or family obligations, because there are a lot of immigrants here in the UK who send money home to help out their loved ones, because it is part of our culture. I mean, I certainly speak for Zimbabwe when I say that we come as a community. When someone is in trouble in our family, in our uncle's family, in our extended family, we rally together and help out. It is part of our culture in Zimbabwe. I'm pretty sure it is the same in other countries as well. Certainly in Africa, I know that, because according to the numbers, I actually made a video showing you the statistics of how much African countries rely on remittances. So in some countries, certainly where I come from, we have those cultural expectations where if you're in a position to do so, you're expected to help out, help your loved ones towards healthcare, paying for funeral expenses, education, fees, and so on. And unfortunately, because people want to fulfill these financial obligations, they then end up getting into debt, because, they are also in a catch-22 situation. Because, I mean, if you're a human being, because of that Ubuntu, there's no way that you can watch your loved ones suffer. There's no way. You want to do whatever you can to help out. And this is why people end up getting into debt. And also you can have unexpected emergencies. I've had a few of those since I came to the UK. The first one that comes to mind is when my dad passed away. I mean, when he passed away, it was years further down the line since coming to the UK. By then, I had learned to manage my finances. I had something saved up, so I was able to use that money to go back home. However, that is not always the case for a lot of people. Certainly, it wasn't the case when I also had another unexpected emergency, which came years before my dad passed away. This is how I lost my tooth here. You can see, I had that emergency. I had a bad tooth. At first, it wasn't that painful. I was like, oh, I'll just take ibuprofen and paracetamol and, the pain will go away. It's fine. But then one night, I couldn't sleep. The pain was excruciating. That night, I remember, I actually took an overdose because I was that desperate. I took more painkillers than I should have because the pain just wasn't going away. I didn't sleep, so I had to call my dentist first thing in the morning for an emergency appointment. So I went in, and then they managed to remove the tooth. That's how I lost that tooth. But guess what? I also had to pay the dentist. So yeah, you can have these unexpected emergencies, and unfortunately, sometimes they force you to get into debt because if you haven't got anything saved up, then there's no other option if there's no one else to give you that money. So this is why it is important to save for emergencies. As a rule of thumb, they say you must have at least 6 months worth of your salary saved up, just in case you lose your job, in case of these emergencies, unforeseen circumstances. But I know for a fact that saving that money as immigrants, with all these other financial obligations that I've mentioned, especially if you're not yet settled with the visa fees and so on, how easy is it to save that money for emergencies? How is it for you to have that 6 month salary saved up? It is not easy. It takes a while to get there, but it is something that we should be striving for. And another thing as well, and this one is a major one, why people end up drowning in debt is wanting to keep up appearances, wanting to prove to other people that our life is fabulous. I mean, because of social media, the temptation is quite high. This is another trap because unfortunately, people end up spending or living beyond their means. But I have had to learn over time, getting into debt, messing up my credit score. I've made a video talking about how I messed up my credit score because I got into debt and it got to a point where I was skipping my payments because I couldn't afford, I couldn't keep up, and I was ignoring the letters that were coming through my inbox, warning, those red letters, they can be relentless. It got to a point where I just couldn't take it anymore. I was like, I'm not dealing with that. But what I didn't know at the time was what they call CCJ. I was taken to court. I mean, you don't have to be present, but they just pass a judgment to say, yes, you are in the wrong. You should have been paying your bills. You ignored those letters. you didn't fulfill your financial obligations, then they slap that CCJ on you. I go into detail in that video. That CCJ stays on your record for 6 years. What that means is when you then go to the bank, maybe wanting a mortgage or another loan or any transaction that you do in the UK, they will do a credit search on you, and then that CCJ will come up. The CCJ is the evidence that you're not a reliable person. You don't pay your bills on time. So yeah, that's how I got into a bit of a mess. Thank God I got over my CCJ. I was able to serve my time, so to speak. If you want to know how I got over my debt, then I would advise you to watch the video that I made about credit scores. And having a lot of debt that you can't repay takes an emotional toll, psychological toll on you. You end up getting stressed, which leads to depression. And also there's shame that is attached to getting into a lot of debt. If you can't repay your debt, there's shame, and that's how other people unfortunately end up unaliving themselves, because if it is too much, people first of all don't want to talk about it, and they sink into depression. And I mean, I've made a video about depression, and we all know the consequences of depression, what depression does. If it is not handled properly and in a timely fashion, things can spiral quite quickly. So yeah, there's an emotional consequence. It can do a number on your mental health, especially here in the UK. What I've realized is that the letters are relentless. They'll keep calling you. They'll keep sending you those letters. And if things get a bit too much, this is how people spiral, because I experienced this firsthand. So I know exactly what I'm talking about. So in conclusion, what I'll say is we need to break the cycle. I know it is easier said than done, especially with those expenses that I've mentioned: visa fees, family obligations, high cost of living, and so on. But we need to start thinking about having that financial cushion. Start saving small. You don't have to save a huge amount of money if you can't afford to. The little that you're able to save. It goes a long way. And also live within your means. Stop comparing yourself to other people. People with flashy cars, buying mansions and so on, because you don't know where they're getting that money from. Stop comparing yourself to other people. Run your race. Live your life. It is okay. And give yourself some grace, especially if you live in a foreign land and you've recently relocated. Give yourself a break. Give yourself enough time to get there. And if you find yourself in debt, like you're stressed out, even depressed, talk to someone about it. Don't suffer in silence. There is help in the UK. You can always go to the Citizens Advice Bureau, and even on the government website, I mean, there's information for everything on .gov.uk. Even here on YouTube, there are channels that talk about managing debt. I've made a video about what to do if you find yourself in debt, because this is something that I've experienced myself. I've gone through it. So I know the steps that I took to get out of debt, to get to a point where I can breathe. So there's help out there. If you're struggling to cope, especially in terms of your mental health, don't suffer in silence. Talk to someone about it. Talk to your GP, phone up your GP, explain everything, and take things from there. There's help out there. So yeah, this is what I had for you in this video. As always, feel free to chip in the comment section. Also, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.